Hey guys, so today I want to do a 5-question tag. This is mostly about parenting, which is quite interesting for me. I'm a first-time parent. I have a 2-year-old, and I don't really think there's any right or wrong way to answer any of these questions. It's just what I do with my child, and I think it would be interesting to share and see what you guys do with your kids in these difficult situations. So question number 1, do you think parents nowadays are more tolerant than in the recent past? Why? I don't know what that exactly means, being tolerant. Are they giving in to their kids more? Maybe, yeah, I think so. Pretty much because there are fewer kids usually per family, so parents pay more attention per each kid, and also their demands are met more frequently than they would be if it was a family of like 7 kids, like it was in the fairly recent past, generation or 2 ago. Otherwise, tolerant, yes, I think we're more tolerant as a society to people who stick out, people with disabilities, people of different sexual orientations and identities, and in general, I think we are more tolerant. I hope we are more tolerant as a society. So I'm not sure, as parents, are we more tolerant, or should we be more tolerant? Sometimes we shouldn't be as tolerant as we are when our children are misbehaving or doing something that could potentially hurt themselves or others, and we let it go, but sometimes we shouldn't be. Number 2, kids today are given cell phones and restricted access to the internet, diverse video game consoles, etc. What age do you think is pertinent to present a child to this technological aspect of modern human life? Is there a different time for each tech? Should they be educated thoroughly before giving them the tech, or let them find out by themselves, and why? So with regards, I think it's different for each technology. I think for cell phones, it's very different depending on the child, because some children are quite mature, some children are quite immature. There's not really an age that would be appropriate. I think it just depends on the person. It's very personal, and each child is different. So some kids are really grown up at 7 and can handle a cell phone, and some kids are just like, until they're teenagers, they basically can't be trusted with a phone. There are some interesting and cool, useful parenting technologies, such as tracking apps, etc., that you can install and use to track your child's movement. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think it's quite useful until the child is a teenager and they're quite capable of, moderating themselves. Hopefully, again, if they're mature enough. With regards to game consoles, I just don't think it's a good idea to have that on a regular basis. I think it's really fun for kids to do, but at the same time, I think it's quite detrimental to their development, to their social and physical well-being. So I'm not a big fan of game consoles being available to children at any age, really. Once you're an adult, you can do whatever you want, but on your parents' dime, maybe healthier choices should be considered first. With regards to internet, I'm not sure. Again, it depends on the maturity level of a child, but I would probably monitor their internet use until their mid to late teenagehood, because right now still my child is too young, but that's what I intend to do. I do not intend to give them free range of the internet, because I do feel like it's quite a wild west still. It's not really well regulated, nor do I think it should necessarily be. What I feel is dangerous is potential predators, and all kinds of things can happen, and I would just rather keep an eye on it. So I would, of course, warn my child that I am monitoring internet, and give them access for a certain amount of time a day or whatever. We can work out an agreement with the child, and definitely monitor what they do online until they're a bit older. And also discuss this with your children, and I think it's important to let them know why you're monitoring. The world is not necessarily the safest place ever, and there are bad people in this world, and children should be aware of that. I don't think we should sugarcoat it, and we should disclose what kind of things can happen on the internet to children once they're old enough. Again, old enough, I think, is defined by how mature is your child, not necessarily by their age. Have to be a judge of character and sort of realistically look at your child and their maturity level to determine these things. Number 3, what do you think should be proper punishment for an angered child who tries to hit a parent? So again, I can only speak of what I've experienced, and definitely my 2-year-old is biting, hitting, and everything in between. Children can be aggressive, and it is actually quite normal, especially in children who aren't yet verbally developed enough to be able to communicate to you exactly what frustrates them. This frustration often comes out in physical aggression, and of course it's not a good thing. So the idea is, especially with a small child, I think, to make sure that they realize that physical aggression is not an appropriate means of communication. So with my child, I use one of two tactics usually, and it also depends on your child and what works for them. But for me, I stop my child as soon as he starts hitting me, and I hold him and calmly tell him that it is not good to do that. It's a bad thing, and it's not appropriate, and it hurts, and it shouldn't be happening. He should never be hitting anyone. And meanwhile, I'm restricting him and making him listen to what I'm saying, but I am at the same time very, very calm. And of course, I mean, you have to be crazy to hit a child back, because this is not really productive at all. It doesn't achieve anything, and your frustration multiplies the child's frustration in general. Dead, steady face expression and calm voice is always a means of communication when a child is having a bit of a crisis. I think it works the best, and it definitely calms the child down as well. The technique, I use it a lot with my patients who are frustrated or raise their voice, usually not at me, but at a situation, explaining whatever situation they're in. I always lower my voice and lower my voice in terms of pitch and speak quietly. That forces the other person to quiet down and listen actively to what you're saying. It's a good tool to sort of bring down the level of frustration in a situation, just being extra calm and speaking more on a quiet side, so that the other person is forced to quiet down as well. Otherwise, they just can't hear what you're saying at all. So I use that with my kid. Also, what helps, if your child is old enough to understand or experience empathy, usually empathy does not develop until maybe a child is 6 or so. They're just not capable of developing full-blown empathy, but my 2-year-old shows signs of development of empathy, which is nice because I can use that as a tool as well. I don't think for him empathy yet is something that is like internally realized, but I think he understands right from wrong at this point, and he can tell when he hurts somebody and that it's a bad thing. So this is the beginnings of empathy are there. And for us, when he hits me, for instance, if he's frustrated and cannot express it, then I put on my ouchie face and act like I'm hurt. And the result of that is usually the fact that he calms down a little bit and comes and kisses it better, because when he gets hurt, that's what happens. Mommy or daddy come and kiss it better. So now he's reciprocating the comforting action to us, which means he understands that we got hurt or he hurt us, and it's his way of making it better or apologizing. He's still not great at saying sorry. He says it because he's supposed to, not because he means it. So those are the two ways I try to deal with an angry child or a child who hits me. Number 4, the child does not want to cooperate with a teacher and does not want to make his work in the classroom. What do you do? Well, I'm not a teacher. I'm not an educator. I am a physician, so I can only speak to the kinds of things that I use to make my job with kids easier. And usually I try to either interest them in what I'm doing, make them part of the process, make it into a game. That usually works with small children. And excuse me, another technique that I use is distraction. If I cannot get them interested and help me, then I try to get them distracted and give parents instructions on what to do to sort of keep the kids occupied with something else so that I can continue with my work. So I think it works well, at least with my child at home, because that's how I deal with him. If I want him to do something, my job is to make it seem like it's an interesting thing to do. And then he's far more likely to do it. And I think that's the challenge a lot of teachers face, is making work interesting for kids. And a lot of teachers are really quite good at it. which is, I applaud. It's a difficult thing to do. To interest a little human in something like that is a tough gig. And I mean, curiosity and interest usually work much better than ordering them around. It's much less effective. I'm not so much into the idea of like ethically, what is the best thing to do ethically, what is the worst thing to do. For me, whatever works is the best thing to do, and that's what I'm going to do. So I just tend to find strategies which make it easier for me to get where we need to be with my child. Next one is number 5, the last question. Would you be kind of a parent that to protect the child from getting dirty, playing with animals and playing wrestling with friends? Or would you be the type of parent that doesn't shy the kid away from the experience? So maybe yes, it's an interesting question. There is a hypothesis that a lot of allergic children that we see sort of emerging in the last few decades with hygiene hypothesis, being that when you protect your child from external factors such as infections, dirt, potential contaminants, you in fact then stop their immune system from working appropriately, and then get the immune system to the place where the immune system starts attacking itself, which is allergic reactions, asthma, all kinds of things like that, dietary issues. So it's a theory. I mean, it's not been completely proven, but we do notice that the more hygienic we are as humans, the more we have autoimmune issues cropping up and sort of disrupting our health, our life, and our well-being. And I think there's probably merit to the theory. Perhaps it's a multifactorial issue, but I do think that there is something to it, because I do see even within my patients, mothers that are quite helicopter-like and really take care of their kids to the point of sort of preventing them from getting dirty, getting sick. They're the kids that usually have these types of allergic and autoimmune issues that crop up, and then mothers or fathers, parents in general, not just mothers, become far more protective on top of that. So, for example, nowadays we do recommend that children start all foods quite early on, including allergic, potential allergic foods such as nuts, like peanuts. We no longer recommend that you wait to introduce these things. In medicine, we recommend you introduce them right away, because there's research showing that there's a significant decrease in the rate of allergic reactions to these foods if they're introduced appropriately at an early age to a child. Previously, to prevent anaphylaxis, we tended to keep the children away from that particular product for a while. So right now, I think we're tending, medically at least, more towards letting kids get dirty, letting kids get sick. A bit of a cold is fine. You know, if you have a child in daycare, you don't get a choice. They get sick all the time. But even preventing them from playing in dirt is not really going to do them any favors in the long run, at least according to what is medically available right now. We don't really recommend children to be ultra protected. Of course, don't let them eat poop, but you know, within reason, I think it's fine. Playing with animals, that's totally fine as well. I think it's a very good thing. Again, exposure to potential allergens or potential disease agents is not a bad thing. Like, let's not go crazy and expose our children to dysentery, but at the same time, you know, humans should be able to live right next to animals and interact with them and not be ill from it. So ideally, you would let your child do that as well. And playing rough or wrestling with friends, nothing wrong with that either. I think it's okay. Bruises are fine. Unless your child has bleeding diaphysis or some kind of a bleeding disorder, then of course you have to protect them because they're at risk of bleeding out. But if your child is a healthy child, it's fine. They can get scratches, scrapes, they can get bruised, they can play rough. It's fine. It's okay. What I can say about this last one is also has to do with playground. Very interesting topic of playground mummies that I've come across. In my experience, there are a couple of types of mummies that come to a playground, in particular 3. They're helicopter moms that interfere in everything the child does, especially if they're playing with other children. They can just come up, and if they think something is not appropriately managed, they will interfere. There is second type, who I think I belong to, who just like watch and wait most of the time and interfere whenever things get too rough for my liking. And there is a third type of mom. This is usually a mom of many kids who's seen it all, who just sort of let the kids handle themselves. And I tend towards the third type rather than the second type, but I'm somewhere in the middle. So I don't think that it's a good idea to interfere when children are starting to have arguments with each other, even at a young age. I think it's very important to mediate this process and to teach your child how to have arguments appropriately. It starts with us as parents. And of course, then it's okay for them to have arguments or disagreements with other children, to fight over toys. It's fine, I think, as long as there's not a big discrepancy in size and age, so that one child can hurt the other one proportionally much more. In that case, I will interfere. If they're too rough at that point and really, really upset, in that case, I will interfere and mediate the situation. But if the kid is just like pulling toy from one another, I will not interfere, and I think it's fine. Even if, for instance, it's another child trying to take away a toy from my child, this is a perfect learning opportunity for my child to start learning at the age of 2 and a little bit about how to manage conflict situations, how to stand up for yourself, how to say no to people. If he gets hurt, then that's a different story, but most of these kinds of arguments are actually very healthy, and it's very useful for children to learn, especially in our case, it's the only child in the family, so it's important for them to learn to manage objects around them and share them with other people, because my child doesn't share very well. Obviously, he needs to learn it, so any opportunity we have to teach him to share, to be kind, to share, or to stand up for himself if somebody's being aggressive and taking his things away, he needs to stand up for himself, and I want him to do that, ideally independently. So I usually take a look and see how things are going. If there's a problem, I tend to watch how things will play out. If things escalate, then I interfere, but if they try to figure it out between the two of them or whatever, I think it's a good opportunity for us to just let children find their management style and how they handle conflicts. I think conflicts are a healthy part of life, and from a young age we need to learn how to handle conflicts appropriately. If a lot of people have a lot of interference from parents, and then they grow up unable to handle issues, and then then you get the bullies and the bullies. You have people who have grown up to sort of take whatever they want and do whatever they want, and think that physical conflict is the only resolution and the only way to manage conflict. And then you have kids who hadn't ever had to be in a confrontation, and then they don't know how to handle it, and they become bullied, and they seem weaker, although they're not. So I think it's important to let kids play it out and let kids manage each other and themselves. And also, if a bully gets kids standing up to them at a young age, they never become a bully. It starts when there's an opportunity for kids to start working their own things out with each other. Again, safety first. If safety is an issue, it's not safe, then of course parents' job is to interfere. So this is how I see it. I know it's a very long answer to a question, but I think it's an important question. How much are we supposed to interfere in the lives of our children, in the way they manage things? Our job is to teach them. When do we teach them? By showing them, and when is it okay to step back and watch what they do and see what they can do by themselves? And at what age? I don't know. I let my 2-year-old get into small 2-year-old fights and see how it plays out. And if it becomes worrisome, then I step in. And if it doesn't, and it usually doesn't actually, usually they figure it out. It's just how I manage. And I don't think there's a right answer. There's not a mommy book somewhere telling you how to manage these things. But that's it for today. You let me know any of the questions you disagree with, or any of the situations that you've encountered as a mom or a dad. Let me know how you would have handled it, and how is it different from what I do. That's it for today. See you guys later. Bye-bye.